Well, what is happening in Sudan's Darfur is not just another conflict which can be ignored. It is not simply a war between rival factions, it is a calculated campaign to annihilate an entire population based on ethnicity. And if the world does not act immediately, Sudan will become the Rwanda of the 21st century. Well, you have to stay with us if you want to understand why we think that the current Sudan massacre is just the beginning of something more evil, which the African subcontinent has witnessed in past. The beginning is always familiar. Firstly, the voices filled with rage divide people into us and them. Then comes the slogans, the propaganda, the dehumanizing language that makes easier to pull a trigger. And the plans remains the same always, make us believe that they are lesser humans. And in the end, entire communities vanish overnight. In the heart of Sudan's Darfur region, the horrors of El-Fasher unfolds in a grim parallel to the darkest chapter of modern African history, the Rwanda genocide. Well, to understand why Sudan's crisis could become the next Rwanda, it is vital to remember what happened 3 decades ago. In Rwanda, the Hutu extremist leadership mobilized the state to mark an entire population, the Tutsi minority, as cockroaches and as subhumans. Propaganda incited hate rates, politicians distributed machetes, and it took only hours for neighbors to turn into executioners. In fact, even priests delivered Tutsi refugees into the hand of militia leaders. Schools became slaughterhouses, churches became graveyards. And in just 100 days, as the world debated different terminologies and bureaucratic distinctions, over 8 lakh Tutsi and moderate Hutu perished at the hands of both militia and ordinary citizens. Entire families were wiped out. Women were systematically raped, bodies choked rivers and filled mass graves. The genocide was neither a secret nor sudden. It was calculated, systematic, and most shockingly was broadcasted openly on radio. And the saddest part is it met with chilling international apathy and delay. Well, today in Sudan, eerie similarities are emerging. The Rapid Support Forces, descendants of Janjaweed militias infamous for Darfur's early 2000s atrocities, are again accused of encircling non-Arab communities, blocking humanitarian aid and executing mass killings with disturbing precision. In fact, survivors recount armed men moving methodically from house to house, ravaging entire villages, executing men, kids, and assaulting women in pattern identical to the genocidal campaign of Rwanda. Also, satellite images reveal charred ruins where homes once stood. Thousands are unaccounted for, countless more are trapped and starving in besieged cities. And the most horrific part is that the civilian bodies are allegedly being burned and buried in secret, an effort to erase not only the living but the evidence of their extermination. As in Rwanda, hate speeches circulated relentlessly, dehumanizing the so-called others and preparing the ground for slaughter, and the same thing is happening in Sudan. Well, history very clearly shows that genocide is not inevitable. It can be stopped, but it requires immediate decisive action. Where Rwanda failed for lack of intervention, Sudan must succeed through urgent mobilization. Firstly, the world must demand unrestricted humanitarian aid to besieged communities and deploy protective missions with clear mandate to deter mass atrocities, not merely to observe them. Second comes the robust sanctions that must be imposed on militia leaders and their financial networks. Logistical chains disrupted and perpetrators should be identified for international persecution. Third comes the safe corridor which must be established to evacuate the vulnerable population. and allow civilians to escape safely through those routes. Fourth, and perhaps the most important, voice of survivors and activists on the ground must be amplified, protected, and given platforms to document abuses. And finally, regional powers must be held accountable for their support of armed factions. An international community must recognize that preventing Sudan's genocide is not charity, it is a moral imperative and a test of our collective conscience. Well, the test is not only for Sudan's embattled survivors, but for the humanity itself. If this slaughter is allowed to grow, the refrain of never again will echo hollow. There is still time to prevent the horror of Rwanda from replaying in Sudan, but the time is running out. The world must choose, act now or live forever with knowledge that we watched another genocide unfold and did nothing.